Good morning, everyone. I'm Pat Tinto, and I'm proud to be this year's reunion committee chair. Welcome all to this 2011 reunion and special weather that we're having. Our first panel is the value of a liberal arts education, and my job this morning is a little superfluous. I'm giving the introduction to a woman who needs no introduction. As you all know, Dean Dorothy Denberg. Dean Denberg became Barnard's first Vice President for College Relations on July 1 of last year. In this new role, she oversees alumni affairs, career development, pre-college programs, and follow-through on the college's global initiatives. She's working on new programs and initiatives now with the goal of linking our alumni to students and our students to our alumni. She will continue to advise students and teach one course every year. Of course, most of us think of her as Dean Denberg. She served as Dean of the College at Barnard from July 1993 until February of this year. As the college's Chief Student Affairs Officer, Dean Denberg oversaw all student services that support the academic mission of the college and enhance student life on campus. She has also taught courses on women in literature and culture, an introduction to the humanities, and reacting to the past in the first-year seminar program. In fact, she will teach a section of reacting this weekend. This past semester, she taught working with ideas with Professor Timothy Halpin Healy of the Physics and Astronomy Department. A proud Barnard alumna, Dean Denberg graduated from Barnard in 1970 and attended graduate school in English at Columbia as a Woodrow Wilson Scholar and a New York Regents Fellow. She earned her doctorate at Teachers College in 1986. Her dissertation was on the process of curricular innovation in liberal arts colleges and included an historical examination of the Barnard curriculum. This makes her the ideal moderator for our conversation this morning, which focuses on the Barnard education.
Thank you, Pat. I think Pat's introduction is longer than my remarks will be, but that was very gracious. And in fact, it is true that I spent several years of my life in the archives reviewing some 90 years worth of minutes of the Committee on Instruction and Barnard faculty meetings to write a little bit about the Barnard curriculum. So quintessentially, Barnard is a liberal arts college. That's probably the one thing that can be said about the curriculum with the one part of the curriculum that has not changed over these many years. And what we'd like to do this morning is reflect a little bit about the strengths of a Barnard education and what the special power of that liberal arts education is. The late Virginia Gildersleeve, longtime dean of the college, when dean of the college was actually the president, once defined a liberal arts education very simply in this way, quote, "The ability to think straight, some knowledge of the past, some vision of the future, some urge to fit that service into the well-being of the community. These are the most vital things education must try to produce." When I think of a liberal arts education, I think of it really as the fulcrum from which Barnard transforms students' lives. And in that context, I've always loved this definition of a liberal arts education articulated by the late James Friedman, who was a former law school dean and for many years the president of Dartmouth. In a book that he wrote called Idealism and Liberal Education, he offered the following answer to the question of why is liberal education so important. "A liberal education," he wrote, "acquaints students with the cultural achievements of the past, prepares them for the exigencies of an unforeseeable future. It provides them with the standards by which to measure human achievement. It sets in motion a process of critical examination and imaginative introspection that leads students toward personal definition. A liberal arts education encourages students to seek the affirmation of their most authentic selves. It sets in motion a process of critical examination and imaginative introspection that leads students toward personal definition." And to me, I mean, I've spent many years promising students at their opening convocation during orientation that Barnard would change their lives. And then I've watched them graduate, and I can see the ways in which they've grown and changed. So what we'd like to talk about a little bit this morning with two outstanding members of our faculty and two very wonderful recent graduates are the ways in which a Barnard education unfolds. The faculty will reflect a little bit about what it is that they enjoy about teaching at a liberal arts college and how they see the power of a liberal arts education. And from the student speakers, I think you will get a sense of how that process of discovering your most authentic self and personal definition evolves over your time at Barnard. So I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one. From my left, your right, Professor Reshmi Mukherjee is the Helen Goodhart Altschul Professor of Physics and Astronomy. Professor Mukherjee joined the Barnard faculty in 1997. She teaches courses in introductory physics, mechanics, experimental methods in physics, supervised individual research, and quantum physics. Professor Mukherjee's research focuses on high-energy astrophysics and astroparticle physics. She uses ground-based atmospheric Cherenkov, did I say that right? Cherenkov telescopes to study galactic and extragalactic high-energy gamma-ray sources. Professor Mukherjee is currently working with the Veritas project. That's not truth or lux and truth. It's the Very Energetic Radiation Imaging Telescope Array System, located in southern Arizona. The Veritas collaboration uses an array of mirrors at night to detect the quick flashes of blue Cherenkov light that result from gamma-ray air showers. Professor Mukherjee also studies active galaxies thought to be powered by supermassive black holes at their centers and unidentified high-energy gamma-ray sources. Above my head. Okay. To her left is her student, Erin Kara, who came to Barnard from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. At Barnard, Erin majored in physics and minored in art history. I mean, that's like so liberal arts. She conducted her research in high-energy astrophysics. She's passionate about music. Erin was a member of Uptown Vocal, a campus co-ed jazz a cappella group. Winner of a very prestigious Gates Scholarship, Erin will begin graduate studies at Cambridge University next year, where she will be studying accreting black holes in the X-ray band. To her left is Professor Rachel McDermott, Professor of Asian and Middle Eastern Cultures and currently the chair of that department. Rachel McDermott is a specialist in South Asia and in particular India. She received her BA from the University of Pennsylvania in 1981, her MDiv from Harvard Divinity School in 1984, and her PhD from Harvard University in 1993. Her research interests focus on Bengal in eastern India and the Hindu goddess-centered religious traditions from that part of the subcontinent. She is also committed to the study of comparative literature and teaches comparative courses in which important religious themes are traced across cultures. Her forthcoming book of Fortunes and Festivals, Money, Power, and the Goddesses of Bengal focuses on the Durga, Kali, and Garadhatra pujas and the relationship between economics, politics, and religion as seen through the lens of these 300-year-old public festivals. 2 years ago, Professor McDermott was awarded the Emily Gregory Prize, named in honor of Dr. Emily L. Gregory, the college's first professor of botany. First professor, period, of botany. The award is presented annually to a member of the Barnard faculty for outstanding teaching and for the interest in which she or he takes in students. To her left is our recent graduate, Nancy Elshami, who graduated actually in 2010 with a double major in Middle Eastern Studies and Economic History. Her thesis focused on industrialization in Egypt during the 1960s and how that process was affected by the shift to economic openness under President Anwar Sadat. Nancy conducted much of her research in Egypt at the American University in Cairo, and her thesis was later presented there during their Young Scholars Conference. While at Barnard, Nancy was politics and opinion editor of the Barnard Bulletin. She's currently a freelance political writer and a research analyst at Cornell University's Institute for Compensation Studies. Reshmi.
Thank you, Dorothy. So good morning, everyone. As Dorothy mentioned, I've been at Barnard for the last 14 years, and I've primarily, my teaching responsibilities at Barnard have been teaching the intro courses. So I teach first-year physics. In the beginning, I used to teach 2 semesters of first-year physics, the 2-semester introductory sequence that a starting physics student would take. So I was thinking about this a little this morning, and I was thinking about physics courses. You know, when you take a physics course, it's pretty much the same anywhere. It's the same textbooks, problem sets, math-based courses, and I started thinking, what's different at Barnard? And one of the things that struck me in the last 14 years of my teaching here is in my intro class, I have a very, very small class size. And this is something that is really unique at Barnard. It's very special at Barnard. It is highly unusual to find an introductory science course with less than 40 students. And that makes it a very special and very unique environment. Because you're teaching in front of a class of 40 students, introductory physics students. These are students who are not necessarily science majors. Some of these students take it to fulfill a science requirement. Some come to this class with no physics background. They haven't taken a single physics course in high school. And some of the students are pre-med students. So it's a very mixed class that I teach. We offer one set of introductory physics course at Barnard, and it's a class that's made up of students who want to be physics majors, like Erin Kara. She's going to talk about her experiences very soon. Students who come to Barnard saying that they want to be science students. And there are also students who want to be pre-medical students who are taking it to fulfill a science requirement or as part of their pre-medical curriculum. So when I teach that course, I feel that I'm able to connect to students who are interested in physics, who are interested in math, but at the same time, I'm able to bring the excitement of physics, the excitement of my research to students who've not taken physics, and in some cases, some of those students decide to go on and pursue research or pursue a career in physics and astronomy. And that I find very special. Because the class size is small, I'm able to spend time on topics that are of interest to certain sections of the class. I get to know my students individually. I know them really well. Students are very good about using office hours. When I post office hours, they're in my office. I talk to them all the time. I see them outside class. They come make appointments to come see me. So it's a very, what can I say? It's a very special relationship that I've developed with these students. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the physics department and the faculty who teach physics at Barnard is that one is able to offer creative courses at Barnard. One of the examples, Dorothy touched on this, is the course that was taught by Professor Tim Halpin-Healy. Professor Halpin-Healy is a mathematical physicist. He's a theoretical physicist. His research involves chaos theory, very math-based. He teaches physics courses at Barnard, but he's also able to combine the physics and arts in a very special way. One of the courses he teaches is called Science and Public Policy. And that's the sort of course that is, I feel like, very unique to what is offered at Barnard, where he is able to bring in his experiences as a working physicist, his experiences in his background training in particle physics, but at the same time, he's teaching this course to students who are not physics majors necessarily. They come from all different disciplines, but who are interested in how physics or ideas about physics influence society, especially sort of the intersection of scientific research, science policy, and at the same time, society as a whole, how they intersect. And especially now, it can be very relevant. So, he has taught things like the Manhattan Project, the thinking of scientists at the time of World War II. He has brought in very unique sort of perspectives. He's done things like, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, he was teaching the play Copenhagen. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw that on Broadway, but a few years ago when it was showing on Broadway, he actually set up a little sort of, not a demonstration, but a work where students and faculty enacted the play. That was part of the course. And I actually went to that. It was wonderful. It was rehearsed. It was very well done. Students were involved in it. And so they were able to get sort of a perspective from physics, and at the same time, how the society as a whole is affected by public policy and physicists. So that was one of the examples that I thought I'd mention. The other really sort of example that I wanted to mention is Barnard offers something called the first year seminar, which is a course that is mostly a writing course that is taken by first year students. And you might think that, first year seminar course is taught by English professors or, not necessarily a scientist teaching that course. But we have faculty member Jana Levin, who herself, she's a cosmologist, works on black holes, but she's also a published author. And one of the courses she teaches is the first year seminar. And the name of her course, I believe, is called Einstein's Dreams. And it's a writing course, but she actually teaches, she discusses novels that use scientific ideas, popular plays, dealing with scientific ideas. And she's able to sort of tie in the sciences and the arts in a very special way, which to me, I think that is what's really special about Barnard. I also wanted to mention that students who come through our department, we are a small department at Barnard, but we are a very close-knit department. We know our students really well. We spend time with our students, and the students who are interested in physics and astronomy majors, unique opportunities are there for them. They take courses, but beyond the coursework, the other thing that we offer is opportunities to do research. And that is very important because you learn a lot from your courses, but it's very important to get first-hand experience in research, especially if you're interested to pursue a career in physics and astronomy. And that is something that we're able to offer our students, both with the faculty at Barnard, as well as we have opportunities across all over the U.S. Through various programs. Barnard is an affiliate. I actually run a program with it's called the NASA Space Grant Fellowship, where Barnard is an affiliate member of the NASA Space Grant, New York NASA Space Grant. We get funding from that. We offer opportunities to students to work at different NASA centers or various research universities and so on. And students who are interested are able to carry out research both within the university college campus or outside. And the one example I'd like to mention is students who are able to combine, because of the wide variety of courses that they take at a place like Barnard, they're able to bring in their other interests and combine it with physics in a very special way. So I'd like to mention one student a couple of years ago who was a dancer. I mean, she was a ballet dancer. She actually had a double major in dance, and along the way she found she liked physics, so she ended up double majoring in dance and physics. And she was really good, and she wanted to find a very special combination of how do you combine dance and physics. But she ended up going to Harvard into a PhD program where she's actually doing the biomechanics of dance. So she's combined physics and dance in a very unique way. So she got in touch with me last year and said, guess what I'm doing? I'm learning about turkeys and how they move. Because she was researching turkey movement to figure out how actually biomechanics works. And I'll actually let Erin speak now, because I had this wonderful opportunity of working with Erin, who came into Barnard wanting to be, work in physics. And she and I have worked on high energy astrophysics in different, using space-based experiments. I'll let Erin talk about that. And I just wanted to mention one thing. The experiment that I work in is in Arizona, southern Arizona. It's called the Veritas experiment. And if you are in southern Arizona, it's actually on public land. It's south of Tucson. It's part of the Smithsonian Observatory. You can go in there and just walk into the visitor center, and they'll give you a tour. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reshmi. Erin?
All right, thank you. And thank you so much for having me here today. I was really excited to talk about Barnard. I just have loved my experience here, and I wanted to share it with you all. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about why I chose Barnard, why a liberal arts education was what I wanted and really needed. I always knew that I loved science, and I always thought that I would do something in physics when I graduated from high school. But I also knew that I loved history and I love art, and it just didn't feel like an option to go to a technical school and get really just scientific training. So Barnard really was the perfect option for me, and I've taken a lot of classes in art history. I'm an art history minor, and a lot of like English classes, and it's been absolutely perfect for me. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about a part of my Barnard experience that's been very influential, and that has been my research with Professor Mukherjee and really many other faculty members here. One of the great things about Barnard is that there is this small, tight-knit community of physicists, and that's been really wonderful for me. But also you have Columbia next door, which is one of the greatest research institutions in the nation, and really having that, having both schools available to me has been an important part of my experience here. So I thought I'd show a couple of slides about the research that I'm doing. I don't know if you can see it. It's pretty light here. So, oh, thanks. So I do research with the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope. It's an orbiting telescope. It orbits in a low Earth orbit every 90 minutes. And it was launched in June of 2008. And really that was the first summer that I started working with Reshmi after my first year here. And we were in her office and watched it launch, and it was a very exciting time. I feel akin to this satellite. And the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope is looking at it's looking at the gamma ray band, so it's looking at the most energetic light that we see. And it comes from very violent cataclysmic events happening in the universe, like black holes at the center of distant galaxies. Oh, that's great. Or like supernova explosions. And we're just trying to understand like how we're seeing the gamma ray emission from these objects. And one of the greatest things about this telescope, I think, is that the data is completely free for everyone. The data is collected at the telescope, and via satellites it's brought down, and you can actually just go onto your computer. Any of you could go and download the data and the tools and be looking at distant galaxies if you wanted to. So if you're interested in that, you can come to me afterward and I can tell you about it. So can I go to the next slide? Actually, maybe I can do that. Thank you. Okay, so this is just a picture of what Fermi sees. And in case you're unfamiliar with this projection, the way that I like to think about it is if you cut this out and we're able to wrap this picture around your head, that's basically what we're seeing. That's all of the visible universe that we're seeing in gamma rays. And right here, this bright spot, this bright line across is our galaxy, the Milky Way. So you see, and all of the points around up at the top are distant galaxies, and we can only see them as points in the sky. And one of the cool things about my research, I think, is that we're just trying to understand what these things actually look like, and all we can see is a point in the sky. So I'm going to be studying galaxies with black holes at the centers of galaxies next year when I do my graduate work at the University of Cambridge, and I've just really enjoyed this field, and I'm very appreciative to Reshmi for introducing it to me. And the last slide, thank you. This is a picture of Veritas, the instrument that Reshmi has been working on, and actually, if you can see, probably not, I'm down there at the very bottom. It's a huge telescope. It's 12 meters across, and there are 4 of them in Arizona. And I had the opportunity to go down just this past semester for like 5 nights and observe during the night. It was a really spectacular experience. And I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities at Barnard to do research. It's taken me all over the world, or really all over the world. I was just in Rome for a conference, and I was in Huntsville, Alabama, doing research at a NASA center down there for one summer, and I've been in California. So it's really been an awesome experience, and I'm very thankful for Barnard for showing me this field. And thank you.
Hello, everyone in the dark. I'm Rachel McDermott, and I'm the chair of a department called Asian and Middle Eastern Cultures. This department was founded at Barnard in 1960 with one stray outpost faculty member from Columbia, and in those days it was called Oriental Studies. And in the early 1990s, reacting to student outrage and also to current trends, the department was changed to Asian and Middle Eastern Cultures. And the department is an area studies department, and we cover most of the world that nobody else covers. We cover everything from Korea, China, and Japan, through South Asia, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, through Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then into the Middle East and North Africa. And we only do this with 5 faculty members. So we have a lot of dependence upon Columbia for helping us. They have 2 mammoth departments that study East Asia and also the Middle East and South Asia. So we tackle the world. And not only do we have such a large space to cover, but we are interdisciplinary, which means that we have no one disciplinary focus. So students, I always tell incoming students who say, why should I study this? I say, well, pick a part of the world and pretend you're looking at it through a telescope, but you change the lens depending on the focus you want to have. So we want you to learn the language, we want you to learn about the history, we want you to learn about the politics, we want you to learn about the religion and the art and the urban studies and as many different disciplinary foci as you like, but we want you to get, each time you take a different tack, we want you to learn about the region from a different way so that you really become a specialist in a region rather than in a particular discipline. I consider this department very Barnard in many ways. First, that it is interdisciplinary, and that we don't want students simply to be, some students say, can I be a major in Arabic? And I say, no, not here at least. You can use and learn Arabic, but we want you to use that in order to understand a region. So we don't want one focus. The second thing is that we are very much encouraging of students to go study abroad. So many of them, as Nancy has done, they spend some time, they go to their region of study, and Barnard has a number of study abroad programs, and we are affiliated with a number of them. So our students go to Tokyo, or they go to Cairo, or they go to Varanasi, they go to Delhi, etc., and they come back, and they are able to use their language or to learn further the language that they are studying. The students also benefit from the faculty members having different disciplinary backgrounds. My own background is in religion, but one of my colleagues who teaches about China is a sociologist. And then I have another colleague who is a literature specialist. So every time you take a course, you're not only learning about regions, but you're learning about them from professors with different backgrounds themselves. We also feel that this is a very Barnard department because of its emphasis on global learning, not only here, but abroad. And I often get letters from alumni saying, "Dear Professor McDermott, I really enjoyed your Introduction to Indian Civilizations class, but now that I'm in India, I see how important it was, but I have learned so much more, and I actually went to Ajanta Caves that you showed us on screens, or I actually went to the Gandhi Memorial, and now Gandhi's message seems so much more important because I've seen people talking about Gandhi, etc." And so we view this little department not only as a gateway, in a sense, to the world, a gateway to Columbia's bigger departments, which help us, but also a gateway to learning globally. Another thing to say about the relationship with Columbia, and that is, I don't know what Nancy will say when she speaks, but we, as I say, we depend upon Columbia's teaching a great deal because we don't actually teach the languages that our students are required to learn. We can't do that. We don't have enough faculty or funds to hire all the Arabic professors that are needed. And by the way, Arabic and Chinese are just, they're taking over the universe. Those two languages, all the Romance languages are in free fall. After 9/11, everybody wants to take Arabic or Chinese. A few people want to take Japanese. Some people want to take Hindi and Bengali, but really it's those two languages, and the languages cannot be staffed fast enough over at Columbia. One thing that I have seen in relation to Columbia is that we have a small little department here, just as Reshmi said, where we get to know our students very well, and we develop very close relationships with them. And our courses are smaller, and we really care about broad education that is not politicized. A lot of the teaching at Columbia is highly politicized, so faculty members teach their politics, and it can be uncomfortable. But at Barnard, we try not, if we have any politics, we try not to let our students know what they are. What I mean is that we try to give equal play. So if I'm teaching a course on India, and I'm off, my last class in my India course is always on Kashmir, and as you know, Kashmir is a highly debated region of the world, and some people feel that it ought to be part of Pakistan, and some people feel it ought to stay in India. And I try to present as balanced a menu of options to my students so that they can come away and see why Pakistan feels the way it does and why India feels the way it does. But they don't actually learn what Rachel McDermott thinks, because I don't want to influence them in one way or another. They can come to me and I will tell them, but I'm not going to teach about it in that sense. I think that the Columbia department tends to be a little bit more politicized, which is also good for students to experience, because then they can say, well, do I like, what kind of teaching is good? It's good to have both sides. I wanted to tell you one other thing about this little department and politics of the world, and that is that after 9/11, we saw so many more students wanting to learn Arabic. Not students who were from Middle Eastern backgrounds, but students of all types coming and wanting to study Arabic. And I noticed with great joy that there are students studying Arabic who come from Jewish backgrounds, and I have students studying Hebrew who come from Middle Eastern backgrounds. And to me, that is just such a wonderful thing. Prior to 2011, when students from certain backgrounds came to this department, they studied themselves. They studied their own languages, which is understandable. But to have people crossing over like this for political reasons and for humane reasons, I just think is wonderful. And it's the sort of thing we encourage at Barnard. Just very briefly about what our students do afterwards. They do everything imaginable. They go on into graduate school studying these regions. They go into public health. They go to law school. They go to medical school. I have a pastry chef. I graduated 2 years ago. We have students who go into journalism. We have students, one student decided to take a year off take a year after, and to go into the Middle East, and she traveled across the Middle East as far as she could on camel. And she wrote a journal, and she sent it to me, and she's now in medical school. But you can do almost anything with this degree because it is supposed to be a liberal arts degree that prepares you broadly to think from many different perspectives. And finally, just to tell you that this department has changed me as well, not just our students. I came, as I told you, from a religion background. And so I thought, when I graduated from graduate school, that I would be in a religion department. Well, it turned out there wasn't an opening in the religion department here, and I was hired in the Asian and Middle Eastern Cultures department. And I thought, oh, darn it, now I can't teach about religion. But of course, that's ridiculous, and you can't teach about anything in this part of the world without touching on religion. But it has also forced me to teach about modern politics, and to teach about ancient history, and to teach about art, and to teach about all of these things that have now broadened my own understanding of the religious backgrounds, particularly of South Asia. The other way that I have been stretched is that for years, until very recently, when we added a Middle East expert to the faculty, I was the advisor for all South Asia and Middle East students studying those two tracks. And Nancy is a marvelous example of this. I am not an Egypt specialist. I've never been to Egypt. I don't know Arabic. The languages I know are Bengali and Sanskrit, different part of the world. But our capstone experience in our department is that students write a senior thesis on a topic of their own choosing that draws upon, if possible, the languages that they've studied, in her case, Arabic, and that also draws upon her coursework and her field work if she's done work, gone overseas and spent time abroad. And we develop a one-on-one mentoring relationship in which the student does the research for and composes and writes the thesis, and I guide her as much as I can in terms of the methods of writing and research, and then she gets another advisor who may be more of a content advisor. But over the years, I have learned about Lebanese feminism, I have learned about Hebrew poetry, I have learned about Iraqi politics, I have learned about so many things from my students because of the smallness of our department, and because of the necessity of advising widely. And Nancy is a marvelous example of this because she wrote a thesis that looks like this, that I will put up here as an exhibit afterwards if you like, which got an A and a pass with distinction, which is not usually given to students in our department. It was on, as it's Egyptian industry between the political economies of Nasser and Sadat, which was an outstanding piece of work that came out of a small little department, very much dedicated to breadth and depth. So with that, let me turn to Nancy.
Thank you. Is it working?
No, not yet. Here, try this one.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Elshami. I graduated in 2010, and I double majored in Middle Eastern Studies and Economic History. Just going back a little to considering Barnard as a college, I was a little apprehensive about applying to Barnard, and that's because my 3 older sisters attended Barnard as well, and they were all very powerful, successful women, and it was a little intimidating, but I was also a little apprehensive that I wanted to become my own person, and I wanted to be, very independent from them, and I didn't want to just be following in their footsteps. So I applied to Barnard, and when I got in and I came and I visited, I fell in love with it, and I decided nonetheless to attend. And looking back now and looking at my own career and the career of my sisters, I've realized that we're the quintessential Barnard family. Each of my sisters did something completely different. One of my sisters majored in English, another majored in applied mathematics and civil engineering, Another majored in political science and Middle Eastern studies, and I myself majored in Middle Eastern studies and economic history. But even my sister that did Middle Eastern studies, we studied completely different paths and completely different approaches to the region. And that's what's really special about Barnard, that you can attend the college and you can really hone your interests and find yourself, even if you come from, the same family, I've come to realize that there's so much opportunity here for finding yourself and studying what you really want to do and learning new things or learning things about yourself throughout the course of your study. When I entered Barnard, I knew that I wanted to study the Middle East for personal reasons, my parents are from the region, but also because it's such an important region to study, especially in this during this day and age and this time. And I knew I wanted to study the Middle East, but I had no conception of how I wanted to approach the region or what it is that I wanted to do. And I took a couple of introductory economics courses, and that was really intriguing to me. But I realized that while economics was very interesting on a theoretical level, I didn't really want to pursue the field on a practical level. And I found this amazing major at Barnard called economic history, and it's a very unique major. I haven't really found anywhere else that offers this major, and it's a mix between, you take the basic courses for an economics major, you take intermediate macroeconomics, you take statistics, but you also take economic theory and economic history, and you take other history courses that you integrate in order to approach economics from this point of political economy and historical economy, and trying to understand whatever country or the world through this economic perspective and why things happen from an economic perspective. And this, and being able to find this major and combine it with, or double major with my Middle Eastern Studies major was a really great opportunity for me, because Middle Eastern Studies is a really great field. I feel like I can. You become a historian and a political scientist and a linguist all in one. You just get a real taste of all these different disciplines, but you really specialize in this one region. And the one thing that I felt that was lacking from my area studies major was this aspect of economics, which is so crucial to understanding any political developments in a country or any historical developments. And being able to combine these two fields was really refreshing for me, and it really I felt that it has given me this tremendous advantage in my field and in this subject that I'm very passionate about. So coming to choose choose my thesis topic, I studied industrialization in Egypt between the 1960s and 70s, and the reason that I was so interested in studying this, I had taken a lot of courses on history in Egypt. I had been to Egypt so many times, and I had come to this realization that there have been so many shifts in Egypt's trajectory throughout the past 50 years. It's gone from socialism to capitalism, it's gone from a monarchy to a republic, it's gone from a Soviet alliance to an American alliance, and these kind of traits in its historical trajectory were really interesting to me, and I had a lot of questions as to why that happened and how these issues came about. So I applied for a grant to research at the American University in Cairo, and while there I became really interested in this issue of industrialization and the shift to economic openness, and I was able to do a lot of great research there that I came back with here, and writing my thesis at Barnard, I always felt like I had, even though the bulk of my courses on the Middle East, or all of my courses on the Middle East were taken at Columbia, which is a great advantage of Barnard, being right there. But I always felt that I had an upper hand as opposed to my my counterparts were Columbia students, because being a Middle Eastern Studies major at Columbia, you don't have to write a thesis. And I don't think that my education would have been as complete as it is now had I not had this tremendous experience of writing a year-long thesis and, conducting my own independent research projects and going abroad and seeking out different sources on a subject that, isn't as widely studied as other subjects, or doesn't have as much resources available as other subjects. And I felt that that was very empowering, and not a lot of students with a BA can say that they've written a 100-page plus thesis on a totally different region of the world, and had the experience to go there and do research themselves. And even though Professor McDermott's specialization is completely different from mine, I really benefited from advising at Barnard. It wasn't not because of content advising, but Professor McDermott's advising was really about how to shape my inquisitiveness, how to approach questions, how to deal with different difficulties in my research, or how to approach different issues from different angles in order to have a comprehensive analysis of what the different issues are and what's going on. And that's really what I came out of from being advised at Barnard, and having that sort of close attention to your work, and having the opportunity to have someone nurture your research is it's very beneficial. And I've this experience of writing a thesis at Barnard has made apparent to me how much I love research, and how excited I am to continue researching and go back to school in the near future. Right now, I'm actually doing something very different. I'm working as a research analyst at the Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations. So I'm doing something that has nothing to do with the Middle East. I'm actually doing research on economic issues, and it's interesting because I never really expected that I would go in that direction. But I found that the skills and and especially these skills of approaching issues from a certain perspective, or how to deal with research, is really what I've come out with from Barnard and from my major. And even though I have this great expertise on this certain region, the skills that I've acquired gaining that expertise, I can apply to any field and any sort of research if I put my mind to it. And right now I'm doing economic research, and I'm hoping to, and I still write on the Middle East as a freelance political writer, and I'm asked to give comments on what's been going on in Egypt recently. And I wouldn't really have been able to have this sort of well-rounded education had it not been for my unique experience at Barnard. And that was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the risk of drawing the obvious conclusion for you, I must say our students and our faculty are what make coming to this place every day a treat. So I'd like to leave some time for you to ask questions of our panelists, but I'm going to ask one or two myself first. I'd love to hear from Erin and Nancy. You've been very persuasive and eloquent in describing the impact that the Barnard curriculum and the faculty had on your experience here. Could you talk a little bit about Barnard as a women's college?
Sure. So, as a physics major, I've taken I took all of my introductory and intermediate courses at Barnard, and it was an all-female setting, and there was never more than, well, there were 30 people in my introductory physics class, and then the intermediate classes, there was never more than, 7 women working together. And often, usually, except for one time, it was with a female professor. And I think that working with a female professor and working closely with this department, it's so encouraging to see like women in this male-dominated field who are very successful, who are able to connect to their students, and they're great professors, but they're also wonderful researchers, and they're able to have a family and be real people as well. So having that experience at Barnard and just working with a group of women has like given me a lot of confidence in this field. And then at the same time, I've taken the upper level classes at Columbia and the graduate level classes at Columbia, and it really is mostly a male-dominated class. I mean, often I'm like one of 4 women in a class of 40 men, 40 students. And I've never had a female professor at Columbia, and but that's really been a really good experience for me as well, because it's more like how the field is going to be. So just being able to have this foundation at Barnard in a really supportive atmosphere where I'm like totally inspired by my professors, and then going to Columbia where it's more like the big leagues has been a really great experience for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are a lot of people who are in this day and age doubtful of the need for women's women-only colleges or women's education. I think that going to Barnard and being aware of not just women's issues in this country, but women's issues all over the world. An institution like Barnard is really it's such a wonderful institution for women's empowerment, and to keep this sort of awareness of the unique role of women and the gaps, the persistent gaps between women and men, and their social status or in pay or several issues. And even though we've seen advancements in that in so many areas, and in this country, it's still very persistent issues in areas abroad. And I think that while Barnard has empowered me as a woman here, and it has made me aware of my capabilities and my rights and what I can achieve here, it is also this sort of advantage that I have has made me even more aware of women's rights issues elsewhere and women's empowerment elsewhere, and why it's so essential to have institutions that foster women and their capabilities, and I think that it's definitely it's definitely been a very empowering experience for me.
Reshmi and Rachel, as faculty members, do you find Barnard's being a women's college has an impact on you professionally or personally?
Well, I mean, I think what Erin just mentioned, that being in a place where you see so many successful women, all our graduates from physics and astronomy have gone on either to graduate school or some other successful career, somewhere where they use their analytical training, where they've applied it to not necessarily physics or astronomy, but anything else where they apply their training. So I'm actually empowered by my students when I see them going on and being so successful. It's just wonderful to see so many successful women coming out of Barnard. I can say from my own experiences, I didn't, when I applied for a job as a researcher, and you apply for faculty jobs, in fields like ours, you just get one offer, you don't pick and choose. So I was offered a job at Barnard, and I took it, and then I didn't know what to expect. I came here, I started teaching, and it was just fantastic. I was, if you have a background in physics, you're always in an environment where you're one in a class of 30 or one faculty. I'm often in a meeting where I'm the only woman in a room full of men. And then I come to Barnard and I'm teaching young women who all want to be science majors in small classes, and it was very empowering. So I can say that the opportunities did come for me to go elsewhere. NASA, for example, was interested in hiring me, but I felt like I want to be in a place where I want to see young people come in every day. I mean, I'm getting older every day, but my students stay the same age, and I want to see hear their ideas, and I want to work with them, and that's what I really like about being at Barnard.
Just very briefly, is this on? Yeah. I, like Reshmi, got one job offer the year that I came here, but I would have paid to come here.
If only we had known.
I made the mistake of, I applied here when I was applying colleges myself, and I applied to Barnard and got in and didn't come here scandalously. I chose to go to Penn, where my father taught, so I didn't have to pay any money, so that was a good reason to go. You could not offer me a job in any other place in the country that would take me away from this place. And the reasons for that are complicated and multifarious, and they have to do with, other things that don't have to do with Barnard, but they also have to do with the fact that I just love teaching in this place with this combination of marvelous women students. And I have to say also that because I teach in a field, this area studies field, often 75% of my students in my lecture classes are from Columbia. 75%. And many of them are men. And I notice in the smaller classes that when I teach a seminar of, say, 25 or 30, and again, most of the students are from Columbia and maybe a third of them are men, that it's always the men who speak. Have you noticed that? It's what people say, in small classes, men will dominate. And I now have, corroborating evidence for that. So I try, I call on the men, of course, but I try to encourage the women to speak as well. And it's not nearly such a sort of disparity in my field as it is in physics. We have many more women, and many more of our students are women. So it's not quite the same. But I love the fact that I'm helping to train or watching them blossom, these marvelous women who are going to go on in various fields. We have a woman in the State Department now. Pretty proud about that. And we had a woman who was interviewed for the CIA, and that was a pretty amazing experience to be, she didn't take it ultimately, but to have somebody come here with these guys with the phones in their ears and the crew cuts and interviewing you, and have you ever noticed that any of this particular student has been on drugs, or what's her life like, and then they disappear and they end up interviewing somebody else. But, this is what Barnard is. It is an opportunity for the world, and our women are the top and the cream. So I'm very happy here.
We'd love to give you some time to ask questions of any or all of our panelists. Stephanie.
This is really to you, Dorothy, to Reshmi and to Rachel. How do you go about defending the literal value of a liberal arts education? With all the pressure now for vocational advancement, there's a lot of negative feeling about liberal arts education being simply a kind of intellectual indulgence. So how do you address that, particularly to those people who are, for the most part, doing the investment, which is the parents?
Well, I'm happy to take a first pass at that. I think Rachel and Reshmi may be in the enviable position of having to do so less often than I have had to do so. But certainly in my years as dean, and before that 100 years ago, when I was first-year class dean, and before that, when I was doing admissions here at Barnard. I mean, I've been answering that question, it'll be 40 years in November. But for me, it's really easy. It's very clear what any good liberal arts education, not just Barnard, but I can talk for 3 days about the value added by Barnard specifically, and you've seen it here, the access to Columbia and so on. And we haven't even touched upon New York City. We should do that for a moment. But training to specific jobs is dangerous and futile. Jobs change and needs change, and the technical skills required for many jobs and professions change. I read an interesting statistic somewhere recently of the huge double-digit percentage, it was something like 40% of people are in job titles that didn't exist when most of us were in school. What we give our students is the ability to think, to write, to carry on a discussion, to muster the arguments and the data to support a position, to write, and write well. And whether you're going to law school or medical school or Wall Street or becoming a pastry chef, speaking to Rachel's student, those skills are the skills that you need in whatever you're going to do. It was very refreshing and energizing, actually, to read a long piece by a father recently who had toured a bunch of schools with his 11th grade daughter over spring break. And he wrote a piece that was published in the Huffington Post and then reprinted in several other places about how he fell in love with Barnard. And the piece was entitled, Why a Women's College? But everything he said about why a women's college could also pertain to why a small liberal arts college. It seems to me that but for the nervousness of parents faced with what's now over a $200,000 investment if you're paying full freight, the real answers are probably that this might be the most important gift you can ever give your child. So, Rachel, Reshmi.
I see this in the students who come into my office who, some students come in thinking they want to be pre-med, and they don't do well in the science classes, and they find, after having taken a course in our department, that they're just fascinated by Japan or something, and but they are nervous, and their parents are nervous, and so what generally happens is there is some sort of crisis, and either they end up double majoring. We have a lot of double majors in our department, people who do us because they love us and something else because it's practical. This is not true in Nancy's case. She loved both of them, but it does happen. Or the students will eventually get up the courage to say to their parents, and I have to admit that I encourage this, follow your bliss. If you are happy in something, you will do well in it, and if you do well in it, that will be a path to something that will be remunerative. And you'll be a happy person rather than an unhappy person. But some sort of a crisis in which the student has to say, I must not do what I thought or what you wanted me to do. And it's very heartbreaking. It's akin to the Hindu student who comes in and says, I've fallen in love with a Muslim. That is a different story, but that is equally, you can understand. Things happen in college that you don't expect.
Interestingly, in Reshmi's field, if a student is going on to a graduate program in the sciences, or even in the humanities and social sciences, but particularly in the sciences, chances are she'll be fully funded. And we've had, I remember one physics graduate a couple of years ago who went straight from Barnard to work at the Hubble
Oh, yes.
So, we have data. We're collecting more data. We're able to talk about the percentages of our senior class who are heading off to lucrative positions straight out of college. But I really think I would answer the question exactly where I began this session, that the power of a liberal arts education is it's the ways in which it transforms you, and a skill set that really is a very strong suit of armor. Other questions? Maureen?
I don't think I need the mic anyway. Please do, thank you. Yes, so better. Dorothy, this is a question for you, I think. One of the arguments I always use for Barnard, for women's education, is the percentage of tenured professors who are women at the major universities. Can you tell us whether that's changed? Because Barnard's always been about 50-50, and Columbia and Princeton and Harvard and Yale tend for tenured professors to be somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 20%. Is that still an operating procedure? Yes?
Yeah, we're actually very proud of the fact that there was a decline, and this is really a tribute to our retiring provost and our past president. But when I first started working at Barnard, the tenure ranks, the percentage of women who were tenured was just over 50% of the faculty were women. And then there was a period of decline, and it was attributable to many things, one of which was probably a societal good, which was that there were more co-ed places beginning to affirmatively hire women. But there's been a very systematic, we have had 2 different task forces that looked at ways in which women had different and more complicated points of disruption on the way to tenure, and steps, the president and the provost had plans and put steps in place, and we're now back closer to the 50-50 mark in the tenured faculty. And in fact, at a school that we may sometimes talk about that's that way, it's still hovering around 20. So, I do think, you've heard it without it being in response to this question. I think both students on the panel have spoken about the impact of studying with women, and I think Erin said it very well when she said, that there's something very encouraging, and even if it's not conscious, encouraging and empowering about having a faculty mentor who happens also to have a child or some children. I mean, that's a message that I don't have to make some hard choices further down the road. But other questions? Yes.
I read the Barnard magazine, because my wife is a graduate, and read of the high admission standards and so forth, and the high SATs, of course. Now, are you involved in any way then in any sort of remedial, or do you have to go to a remedial level with your students to bring them up so when they come to Barnard, they hit the deck running? Anybody?
No, I have to chase them. They're already running. I have to chase them. They're already running. No, I don't have to do any remedial work.
No remedial work.
I mean, not in anything that I teach. I mean, no.
We do have a summer program that just celebrated its 40th anniversary. Some of the funding comes from New York State, but it's a program in which we enroll approximately 25 students each year whose ability is very, very high and whose potential is very high, but they come from what I believe the new expression now is under-resourced schools. I don't like it much, but that's the expression I hear people use. But they come from schools that don't have, for instance, the lab facilities that other schools in wealthier school districts might have, or whatever. So those students participate in a 4-week summer course primarily with math and science components. But in point of fact, we don't engage in remediation per se. We do have 1 or 2 sections of our first-year English program for non-native speakers, but that's not remedial. So. Yes?
How stringent are requirements?
Oh, so that, I would love, it's a great question, how stringent are the requirements? I'm not going to answer that because, as my introduction said, my dissertation I spent a lot of time looking at the requirements for the degree from 1889 up until almost the present. I would love to have the students answer that question because how, to use your word, stringent, is really, and is only answerable in terms of how students experience the requirements, so.
I'm sorry, the question was how stringent?
Stringent are the degree requirements.
Well, by that I meant when I was here in the 50s, I would say half the courses, you had to take English, you had to take languages, had to take science, had to take history. It was really a broad spectrum of requirements.
Well, I'm proud to say we still require all of those things.
Yeah. Well, while I cannot say to any degree at all that I am a math or science person, I came to Barnard and I really liked Barnard because of the way the curriculum is set up, the 9 ways of knowing, and I feel that, even though taking 2 semesters of science and a math was a challenge for me, along the line, it was really, it's really enriching to be able to come out of Barnard with this very well-rounded education. Even though I might not use, some of the courses that I had to take for my requirements on a practical level, I think that, it just really speaks to the nature of Barnard as a liberal arts college and the value of a liberal arts education to graduate so well-rounded and able to speak on, classical music and Gregorian chants, even though, that's something that's, I probably won't use on a practical level, or, be able to have at least a basic understanding of biology. And Barnard doesn't just enrich you for a position or for a paycheck, it enriches you as a person, and it enriches your knowledge and your soul and every other aspect of your being. So that I think that the 9 ways of knowing, they might be a challenge in some respects, but even within, these requirements, you're required to take a science, but you can choose whichever science you like, or you're required to take something that has to do with social science. But, even within these broad spectrums, these broad subjects, you discover yourself within that subject area, and that's also something that's very interesting.
Maybe I should have said how many. I fully agree that opening yourself to unexpected opportunities is a positive experience. But when my daughters went to Smith in the 90s, there were no requirements per se.
There still are none. It's such a scandal.
Well, I'll tell you, in my daughter's case, it was okay with me because they had a very, very stringent private high school education. So they didn't really need to be exposed to languages or science or something. They had already done that. But I still think it's a very good idea. But I mean, people are still here required to take, say, X science and X, one foreign language for 2 or 3 years. I think it was 3 years when I was here. 3 years or pass a test.
It's very interesting because the latest revision to the curriculum which has been in effect now for about 10 years, maybe 12, was an extremely intensive, soul-searching process on the part of the Committee on Instruction, which is the faculty committee charged with curricular responsibilities, but the entire faculty was part of the conversation. And it took 2.5 years, and one reason was that it wasn't simply that every existing requirement was held up and looked at from multiple points of view and question, does this stay or does this go? But the larger question of what's not in this curriculum that should be was also on the table. So in fact, we went from slightly fewer to slightly more requirements, but we compensated for that by saying that in some cases, the general education requirements could count toward a major. I would say that for a student who did but one major, and that would be like your average major of 10 to 12 courses, that slightly over or about half of her program would count toward requirements, and the rest would be elective. 2 big points. One is that there is an increasing trend among students to double major or to major and minor. But the other big point is something that Nancy said, which you can't underscore enough, and to my mind, this has always been the heart of the Barnard curriculum, and it's certainly what makes the curriculum very distinctive from something like a core, and that is that within any requirement at Barnard, you have a huge range of choice. So one of the requirements that we added in the last go-around was an arts requirement. Well, that can be a performing arts, it can be history of music, dance, art, it can be dance in New York City, and similarly in the category of historical studies, one student might choose to take the survey of American or Western European history, and another student might be fulfilling that requirement in an upper level 3,000 level course. Does that better answer your question?
Yeah, and also, how many courses does a Barnard professor teach?
Oh, that's a very good news story. Why don't you answer that?
Well, I think it,
Why don't you both
varies
answer it?
with departments. In the science, it's two courses a semester. I think in humanities it's 3.
It just changed to 2. Yeah.
It is more than what an average research university would teach.
Well, actually, the recent changes brought it in line. Yeah.
All right. So it's about 2.
Katie.
I was interested in asking about the physics department and the cross-listing of courses. It's kind of occurred to me because there had been, when I was here, variations and, in that idea. And how is that looked at now, and how is that done in physics? I mean, I didn't take physics when I was here, but my son is majoring in physics now, so I'm looking. He's not at Barnard, obviously, but and also I wanted to ask, what happened to physics for poets?
Yes.
I remember people talking about taking physics for poets, and what is that exactly now?
Well, I guess cross-listing, you mean courses that are cross-listed between Barnard and Columbia, right? Yeah. Well, physics department at Barnard is a small department. We are faculty of 4, actually 5, 4 professors and 1 lecturer. So obviously we don't teach all the courses, but the big difference is that we do teach the intro courses. And as I mentioned earlier, the intro courses are very significant when you start out in a science course, because often, you come with no background in physics, so it's very important to be in a course like physics, to be in a small class size. So we've taken, that's a conscious decision that there are courses that I teach, the exact same courses I taught across the street, but they're much larger. So our students take intro courses at Barnard. This is where they form their network of students, Barnard students. The third semester intro course is taught at Barnard. It's a small class. It's not. No, there are students who could come. They're free to take. Columbia students are free to take our courses. The first 3 courses are really Barnard-focused courses. As you go to upper level courses, then students go across the street. I teach an upper level course at Barnard, which is a part of the Barnard major requirement, but I have Columbia students coming this way in my class because they're cross-listed, so students are able to go across between the 2 campuses. The courses taught at Barnard, we integrate the lecture courses with the laboratory, which I actually should have mentioned earlier. That's again another very unique experience at Barnard. You're able to do that because we have such small classes. So I don't know if that answers your question. Physics for Poets used to be here. We don't teach that anymore.
That wasn't the real name.
Yeah, I think it was Physics for Poets, actually.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was Physics for Poets. But there are courses along those lines, research seminar in physics, which is more, gives you an idea of what's going on in the current physics world without necessarily going into the mathematics of it.
But is that a science?
It won't satisfy the science
It won't
requirement if it
satisfy
doesn't
the
have a
science.
3-hour lab.
Right.
I think we only have time for one more question.
I have a very small and specific question, but maybe it'd be fun to end with it. My name is Sylvia Borstein. I'm class of 56. A number of my colleagues are here at our 55th reunion. So I was very interested in when Professor McDermott said that in the classes that have men and women in it, the men dominate the conversation. 55 years ago, as freshmen, we were required to take a course that, if I remember correctly, Dean, was called Modern Living. I wonder what happened to it. It was Modern Living, and I'm pretty sure it was taught by Ursula Niebuhr. Do you remember that? But one of the things that I remember is that Professor Niebuhr had done research. Her research at that point was on whether or not women spoke up in mixed groups, and I remember being asked questions and doing questionnaires about when you find yourself in a mixed group, do you dumb yourself down? Do you speak up as much as anyone? I remember feeling outraged by the idea that I would not present myself at the full level of my capacity. But I was a little bit taken aback, and I find it very poignant and touching because I would not have expected that 55 years later, with the world having changed as much as it has, that the women still do not speak up. So I had a sort of just, what, is that true still? And whatever happened to Modern Living, since you're the expert on archives of courses? Did it just disappear?
I can tell you that when I was a first-year student, but we were freshmen then, in 1966, there was no more Modern Living. We had a course that met 6 times each semester, taught variously by guest lecturers that had replaced Modern Living. And I could walk down memory lane and entertain you, but among our guest lecturers, I'll only mention a few. Among our guest lecturers were Dr. Rollo May, the psychologist, Millicent McIntosh. I don't have to tell you what she told us. Dr. Alan Guttmacher. You can see where the direction was going, but we don't have an equivalent to that any longer. We do try through the various student services to offer a lot of programming and resources and small conversations in the residence halls and elsewhere that talk about stress and that talk about ways in which women negotiate the balance between career issues and personal, the unfolding of one's personal life and balance. But there's, I would say it's that the only universal requirements that pertain to all students are those that are built into the formal part of the curriculum. So that's an interesting question to end with, and I thank you. Thank you all for coming, and I especially thank you to our panelists